In this video, we're going to look at an Android app that uses Volley to read a JSON file off of the internet. The code for this app can be found at the URL seen. Okay, so here we are in Android Studio. We are going to use Volley to access a file off the internet. And so there's some few setup things. And so one is in the gradle. So this is the module gradle. And down here in the dependencies, we are announcing that we're going to use Volley, and I'm also going to use Picasso to display an image. So I'm announcing here in the gradle that I'm going to be using these libraries. And when I make this edit, I will have to resync the gradle. And it will prompt me to do that. Another thing I need to do when accessing the internet is edit the AndroidManifest. And I add up here the permission to use the internet, so the app can use the internet based on this, granting it permission. And I'm also adding down here, this line 13, that the particular website I'm going to be accessing is an HTTP rather than an HTTPS. So it is not encrypted. And so we are allowing clear text traffic. Okay. So let's then look at the activity main. Not too much interest over here, but we are going to have a spinner. So sort of this list, and in this case, the JSON file we're reading has information about Harry Potter movies. And so that's going to be loaded up with the titles of Harry Potter movies. And there's going to be information displayed. So this is just a label for the director, and then a text view to display the director, the writer, the producer, the music, an image view to display the movie poster, and then a button so that one can start a new intent and go over and look at the trailer on YouTube. And all the information for all those things are going to be in the JSON file. So now we'll go over to MainActivity. And I have some notes at the top, just saying what we're doing. We're using Volley JSON, and we're going to have an intent that goes to YouTube. Volley is, we're going to access a resource, in this case, a JSON file from the internet. And so we're going to be engaging in a client server interaction. So the app will be the client. It's going to make a request. The HTTP server is going to respond with the JSON file. And so we'll see some of that sort of vocabulary of request and response in the Volley code when we're writing it. And here we just have a reminder to edit the gradle, which we already talked about, and to edit the manifest, which we also already talked about. Okay. Then there are a bunch of imports, including Volley and Picasso, and some JSON stuff. Okay, so our usual connect the interface and code. So a code version of the spinner, and the text view for director and the writer, the producer, the music, and image view to show the poster, and a button to go over to the trailer. Here is the URL specifically for the JSON in question. And then the images, the posters, are going to be also located in the same thing. So in this case, we have what I'm calling the base URL, the sort of the folder in which things are located. So let's have a peek at that. So here is that directory and it has the posters, and it also has the JSON. Let's have a look at the JSON. In this particular JSON, and I'm going to have an example where I do something different, but in this example, we are starting the JSON with a curly bracket. So that means we're starting with an object. That object has a property known as films. Then films, there's a colon between the name of the property and the value. And then the first thing we see is a square bracket. So that means that this property's value is an array. And then that array is of objects because we see another curly bracket. And then that object within that array has properties like title, director, writer, with values of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Chris Columbus, and Steve Kloves. Okay, so we have an object with a property that is an array of objects with then further key value pairs. Okay, so that's what we're going to be reading. We're going to assume the code assumes that we know not necessarily the data in the file, maybe not even how many elements are in the array, but we know the basic property names, that we know it starts with an object. We know the property is called films. We know the properties of the individual movie objects. So we know a lot about the file. We don't know everything about the file. If we knew everything about the file, we wouldn't need the file, but okay. So that's where we are at this stage. Okay. So I've declared an array list for the title. So I'm going to make a parallel array. So I'm going to get from the JSON. First, I'm going to get an object from the JSON, and then I'm going to get that array of JSON objects from that. And so I'm declaring an array, a JSON array, and I'm also going to have this parallel array of just the movie titles for the purpose of using with my spinner. Okay, so here I'm announcing that I'm going to use Volley, and I'm going to have a request queue. So I'm going to go out and use a resource off the internet. I'm using Volley to handle that for me. And I could be getting more than one resource. I'm not in this case, but I could be getting more than one resource. And so there would be a queue of requests. Okay. So I make a JSON object request, and I have to again know what I'm getting from the from that JSON file, and I am getting the first thing I'm getting is an object. So that's why it's here, JSON object requests. That's what I'm using Volley to get, a JSON object. I announced that it is a get method. So we can have like a post method or a get method. I'm using a get method. This is sort of in the open, so it's just Harry Potter information, so I don't care about it being protected in any way. The URL up there is of the JSON file. And then there is this JSON request property, which we set to null. And then we set up a listener for the response. So we're going to make a request, then that server is going to respond. We're going to listen for the response, and then we're going to announce what we want to do when we get that response. So here is this arrow notation. So what we get from the response listener is a response, which we know is going to be JSON because that's the sort of thing that we are requesting. And then we know, because we've looked at the file, that that object has a property called films, which is an array. So from the response, we're going to get the array, which is the property associated with films. Okay, I want to make that parallel array to work with my spinner. So I'm looping through the JSON array. I'm grabbing an individual movie and I am getting from the movie the string property, the title, which is a string. So this I'm adding to film titles, the titles of the movies that I'm going to use in my spinner. Now that I have that parallel array, I'm setting up my spinner. So here's film titles. This is just an idea of what this just is telling me how the spinner is going to look. And then this is the context of the spinner. So I set up an array adapter. I use the array adapter associated with the spinner. And now I have my Harry Potter film titles loaded up in the spinner. And next I'm going to set up a spinner event. So on the item selected, then so this is an on item selected listener. We're responsible for two methods, the on item selected and on nothing selected. And I never do anything here, but I have to have it. And then when the item is selected, I usually sometimes I'll work with view, which it will be what the user was seeing. And so it'll be the title of a movie in a view. And, but also what is useful, since I have sort of an array list, is this index I. Okay. So here I am casting the view as a text view so I can grab its text, and I'm just toasting it out. So just to sort of, in principle, show I have access to the view information and I can do things with it. Now more, I'm going to work with this index I. And so I have the JSON array, and I'm going to get the ith object, and I want the director and the writer and the producer and the music, and I'm displaying all that information in my various text views. And then I'm using Picasso to load up the image. So in the file, in the JSON file, let's have a peek at that again. In the JSON file, the image is just the sort of file name and extension. And so we have to add that onto our base URL to get the full URL. And because we're using Picasso, we're getting it. And we're also getting those images off the web, which we can do with Volley, but sort of Picasso's sort of a bit easier. So I just stuck with Picasso. And there's also Glide and Coil. Glide probably more efficient, Coil more syntactically succinct, but Picasso is just sort of one I've known for the longest, so I tend to use it. Okay, so that was the select. Here's, if we read the information, then we put up the title of the movies in the spinner, and then this is the spinner event. And here is our button event. So we set up a click listener for the button to show the trailer. And this time we're not in the spinner event, but we want to get the spinner information of knowing what position we're in. And so that tells us which movie was selected, which index. Sorry, I keep hitting this. And then I'm using the JSON array, getting that the object with that position, getting the YouTube code. And again, we always have to look at the file and see what the names of the properties were. So in this case, the property's name was YouTube code spelled out in all small letters. And so all that case sensitive stuff matters. And so now we have the code. So again, we just have a YouTube code, so we don't have a full URL. And so again, when we're trying to get the intent and we're putting together the location, the resource location, we have to put together the pieces. So here is the base URL for watching a video, and then this variable I called YTC, which is a YouTube code. Okay. So that is the intent to show the movie. Okay. Here is back to Volley stuff. So that was all about the response. if we got a response from Volley. Here is if we did not get, if the response from Volley was some kind of error, we're just saying toast out the error code, cast that as a string, toast it out. And then this is the end of all that JSON object request from Volley. And then, but here's this very important part of to add that request to the queue. So nothing of what we coded above would work if we didn't add it to the queue. So that was, again, this app of using Volley to go to the internet to read a JSON file. The JSON file was an object had a property that was an array of objects with information about Harry Potter movies. We loaded that information, the movie titles, up into a spinner, and we could show information based on the user's choice of movies, and also go over to YouTube, and open up a new intent and go over to YouTube and show a trailer of that movie. So just to recap, we did some initial work in the gradle in the dependencies region to say we're going to use Volley and also Picasso. We did some work in the manifest to say that we wanted permission to use the internet, and also that this clear text traffic attribute here. And then we were doing a client server interaction. So we had a request and a response, and then we gave our actions of what we wanted to do if we got that information in our response. So that's what I wanted to show you in this app. Thank you for listening.